I'm going to start by introducing myself and my background, then we'll allow the panelists to introduce themselves. So my name is Jamal Robinson. I currently, during the day, am a business development lead, and then during the evenings, I work at UC Berkeley teaching people various topics around big data and machine learning. Sorry about that. Just a clarification, if you've looked at my profile online, I was wondering yesterday when I went to the meetups why everybody was so friendly to me and speaking to me every 5 seconds. I put that I was an investor on there, but I mean that I've invested in like half a Bitcoin personally. Not that I'm going to be able to finance your ICO, so that's just a heads up. So we want to get into the panelists who are extremely impressive, and I was just looking at their backgrounds. I want to bring out a few highlights because they might be modest and might not speak to these things. But we have a combination of CEOs, people that have delivered TED Talks, addressed the United Nations, award-winning entrepreneurs raising over hundreds of millions of dollars, PhDs from the top universities, deep and diverse enterprise experience across a lot of Fortune 500, Global 2000 companies, multiple patents, distinguished professors, published authors. Some have made the Forbes list and have presented digital innovation strategies directly to the US president. So really impressive brunch, and maybe starting furthest out. Mohan, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jamal. I'm an IBM fellow. I've been with IBM Research for 36 years. So I'm a one company guy. I also, this is in San Jose at the research lab from which relational databases and SQL came. I also was for a brief period the IBM India chief scientist based in Bangalore. I'm a hardcore database guy, nuts and bolts, very detailed kind of guy. I've never been a manager in my entire career, even though I'm an IBM executive because of the fellow title. For about a year and a half now, I've been working on blockchain, obviously with the Hyperledger fabric, since IBM had a lot to do with its introduction. I think I'll stop, and I'm also a distinguished visiting professor at Tsinghua University, so some of you, I can't see everybody here, might be interested in that Chinese connection, and I can talk about it later if you're interested outside of this panel as to what China is doing in AI as well as blockchain.
Hi everyone, my name is Chris, and my company is called UCOT, and we address the unintended and willfully ignored consequences of technologies. So while everyone else is looking on what's great or what's going well, we are looking on what may not be going well. Stop me if you heard things like, data breaches involving millions and millions of people, including maybe some of you in the room. Things like tech addiction. In this 2018, we're turning users into patients. There's issues that are gonna be very, very big in the coming years on job loss and waste and outsourcing parenting to devices and things like that. So we focus on that to try to create solutions on what may not be going right.
Hi everyone, my name is Sindhu Joseph. My background is in AI. I have a PhD in artificial intelligence and around 17 years of working experience, both from an academic as well as from industrial background. 6 US patents in AI, natural language processing, as well as in machine learning. My regular job is I'm the CEO and co-founder of CogniCor, one of the leading cognitive virtual assistant platform specifically tuned for enterprises. You can imagine that as kind of an Alexa or Google Home, but for enterprises. We sell globally to Asia, US, and European markets in some of the very interesting use cases like selling insurance policies fully automatically without any human intervention to policy holders. So that's my background. Look forward to the panel.
Hello. All right, my name is Garry Fowler, And I've been in technology over 35 years. I've done 8 companies, everything from AI companies to a successful IPO in NASDAQ. I helped create 2 venture funds. I'm currently the CEO of DY Investments and also listed as the #2 AI productivity company, Findo. So a little bit about the company. So we have 3 different products. We started out with search because each one of us today has a problem. You know the file exists, but you can't find it. Can you hear me? Yeah. Each one of us has about 300,000 items within their personal cloud. Every day, you go in and somebody says, I sent an email, did you get it? I can't find a file. I've either forgotten the keyword or I've forgotten the location, whether it's in Google Drive, Slack, etc. So our first thing was to connect those different data sources together. We've developed 16 patents. Our second iteration was a task assistant. And we went through 1.2 billion documents, and we found some interesting things. We understood, number one, that people didn't want to, they didn't remember their passwords. So it didn't matter if they're a PhD, where they work at Intel or Amazon, or they're CEO of their own company. They just don't remember them, they just don't want to do it. So as we migrated forward, now with the last iteration, you can look it up, it's called EVA, YVA. We actually, with this company, have our first paying customers before we've announced. So we actually have 4 enterprise paying customers before we've announced. So I'm CEO and co-founder of Findo. My partner is Dr. David Yang. David is one of the foremost AI serial entrepreneurs. He started Abby 29 years ago. He's done 10 AI-oriented companies. Abby's got about 1,000 employees. So anybody that's out there that's got a sales, marketing, operations background, it's really good to have people just like you that have technical backgrounds as a co-founder. It's a beautiful combination. And I started the #1 accelerator in Russia, GVA Launch Gurus, and I've had about 600 people through my accelerator over there.
Really impressive background for everybody. So we'll go ahead and get started with the panel. If you've been to any artificial intelligence and blockchain talks, if you've been to 100, you've probably gotten 100 different definitions. So we're not going to do anything different here. We're going to give you our definitions of artificial intelligence and then blockchain so we can level set, talk about the values they have to society, and then after that we'll get deeper into AI and blockchain combination. So we'll start with Sindhu and Mohan.
So I'm going to define what is AI for us, for this panel and for the context. And I think it's very relevant to discuss what is AI because AI these days mean everything to everyone. It's a silver bullet to solve all problems. So for me, it is to create or try to replicate human intelligence in some form so that you can create intelligent systems to drive automation in decision making, in business processes, in conversational interactions. So that is, I think, could be a pragmatic definition of AI. If you go a little bit deeper into, if you want to extend the definition of AI to more longer term, it is very interesting to look at how AI can be self-motivated, because this question can lead to interesting applications in both blockchain as well as AI.
Thank you. I'm sure most of you know the origins of blockchain, and unfortunately most people only concentrate on Bitcoin and all the associated technologies, namely, cryptocurrencies and ethereum and such. That's the so-called permissionless or public blockchain, and that sort of has taken over the world, and all this talk of decentralization, ICOs, and everything. I'm sure the next few days there'll be a great deal of discussion. But I would rather let people pay more attention, because I feel in a practical sense it's the permissioned blockchains, the private blockchains, that are going to have really dramatic effects that go far beyond all the speculative stuff that happens in the permissionless space. So in that spirit is how IBM, as a leader more than 2.5 years ago, initiated the Hyperledger Consortium under the Linux Foundation and contributed source code, which subsequently got named as the Fabric system. So there are many such systems now around. Even in the Hyperledger, the attempt is not to come out with a single standard system. Unfortunately, unlike in the case of the relational databases where there was Ted Card who came up with a conceptual model of relational databases, and then there were many implementations, sometimes even with different query languages. Here we have the fundamental problem that not only are the APIs different across these different private blockchain systems, but even the conceptual model that goes behind the APIs, there is no standard at this point. And so this is a bit of a chaotic state of affairs, but still there are many production deployments. It's not just people kicking the tires kind of situation, although there is quite a lot of that also going on, but there are a significant number of production deployments across the globe now, and the momentum is enormous. And I will urge you all to, if you have the time, go look at my other presentations where I get into a great deal of detail, and also, start paying more attention to the private blockchain, and don't just, in a mass mentality, only concentrate on the Ethereum and its, accompanying kinds of systems that everyone talks about. Go away from the herd and do the more practical thing with the private blockchains.
Great. So thanks for introducing those technologies separately, but the majority of this talk is about actually talking about how we can put these technologies together, how we can leverage blockchain, which is an emerging technology, and artificial intelligence at the same time. So Sindhu, maybe I'll start with you and some examples you have, just to kind of level set that portion. There was a paper, The Brain as Decentralized Autonomous Organization, that came out of Kingston University. In this paper, they kind of talked about using blockchain to create a self-aware artificial intelligence. You'd be able to store all of the mind files, meaning your thoughts and feelings and emotions, and almost create this autonomous version of yourself that would be on the internet and would think for you and actually process various requests for you. So Sindhu has experience in this area, and maybe she could talk about this a little further.
One of the things that AI can do is to, I think many people haven't looked at AI in this way, but to have kind of a self-motivation for AI systems. So if you look at our own intelligence, human intelligence, one of the things that we do is we have our own motivations for doing certain things. So in one of my studies, what I have used is a philosophical theory called the Theory of Coherence, which helps us as human beings to select certain information. When it's coming to, for example, all of us have information, beliefs, motivations within us, and when a new information comes to us, we can select whether either reject or approve this information based on our existing mindset. So likewise, this theory can be used to help artificial systems to have its own motivations. I have done a lot of work in this area to create actually self-motivated systems that can act on their own behalf. And what's the use of having such systems? So that is one thing that I would like to highlight in the blockchain conference, because as part of AI, there is a lot of work that has been gone into these areas, an area called multi-agent systems, where you have a lot of specialized single agents that work together as a community, and they can federate decisions, they can regulate themselves, they can abide to norms. So all these issues of trust and reputation has been solved in the context of several multi-agent systems, like electronic institution is one such system. So I think that blockchain can greatly benefit from all the research that has gone into this area. I cannot talk in detail, but I encourage you to go and look at this branch of AI that will greatly contribute to the blockchain activities that is going on in this. Another thing that I want to highlight is how AI can benefit from the blockchain community. One thing that, if AI is lacking today is there are huge number of algorithms with great accuracy that we are able to build these days. But one thing that is still lacking is the quality of data or the actual data itself. And so how do we get such high quality data that is able to give us better results? And I think that's where blockchain's important comes in. You are able to generate clean, very verified, validated data. And I think this is two of the mechanisms where blockchain and AI should be combined.
And it's nothing like coming late and being put on the spot. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Michael, if you can introduce yourself. Where we're at in the conversation right now is we'd like to speak about the benefits of AI and blockchain and maybe some use cases of where they can work together effectively.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm fashionably late. Caught a bit in traffic up here.
2,
but,
3,
wanted to quickly introduce
5,
myself.
6,
I'm
7.
Michael Heinrich. I'm the founder of a company called Oh My Green, and we're a Y Combinator summer 2016 company. But I'll give you a quick background on myself. I started out in product management at Microsoft and SAP before I then moved to Bain & Company, where I was a consultant to Fortune 500 type companies. And then I worked for Bridgewater Associates, which is a big macro hedge fund in Westport, Connecticut, before sort of going on this journey of starting my own company. What Oh My Green does today is we're a one-stop food service company for companies such as Apple, Amazon, Google, and so on. And to me, the topic of AI and blockchain is really significant because what we found in serving tens of thousands of people on a daily basis is that in order to do this at a very high fidelity sort of processed way, you need to build a lot of technology in the back end so that the food arrives right on time, that your stock keeping units are not out of stock, and so we've built a lot on the back end to automate pretty much most of our supply chain, and so that's one particular use case for AI. To me, if you, for example, look at the way the human body is structured, it keeps a homeostasis of its temperature. The moment there's a stressor coming in from the outside, let's say the temperature rises or goes lower very quickly, the body adjusts and it's sort of self-referral in that way. It produces something very quickly to either sweat or to increase heat. Modern supply chains in general don't work this way. Usually you have somebody that's producing a ton of stuff, or you've got a bunch of distributors that don't really have an idea of what the end demand signal is like. And so you've got this really weird system that's not auto-adjusting itself, so that the product that you want is not ending up in the hands of the consumers that need it. And only about a third of the supply chains today are digitized. And that's a big issue, because if you're not digitized, how can you know where something is? How can you be self-referral? So I really see AI playing a really big role and being the sort of self-referral system that's then managing and optimizing sort of different supply chains together. And blockchain, to me, there seems to be the underlying databases really for that to happen. If you have a shared sort of ledger that has all the state and information that the different players within the supply chain are sharing, then it's sort of that fundamental underlying basis that makes AI work within supply chain. So that's just a little bit of my view and the view that I bring to this panel.
So one of the things that we can talk about is AI to blockchain is being able to scale to prune the necessary data. And also, as we get at the applications level, AI to blockchain, one of the things we're going to want is we're going to want AI to be able to make sure that the system's secure.
Thanks for that colorful commentary. And then also IBM is doing work in this space, so Mohan, please speak to that.
So I wanted to talk about a very specific technology that IBM recently announced a couple of weeks ago, literally. It's called the IBM Crypto Anchor Verifier. This has to do with when you're using blockchain to manage not just purely digital assets, but you're trying to manage physical assets, then the question that comes up is, how can you tell if somebody substituted a genuine thing with a fake thing? So somehow you have to have some way of identifying the real thing and be able to distinguish that from any substitutions that might happen along the chain of transfers of this kind of item. So what this is essentially something like taking a fingerprint of whatever the thing is, whether it's diamonds, packages, it could be artwork, it could be even fancy wines or olive oil and such. So the technology that's been recently talked about is a lens that gets attached to your mobile phone, and this lens now lets you see things even at the micron level. And so you can take things like fingerprint, depending on what the item is. Like for instance, for liquids, the viscosity can be measured. You can even come up with QR codes that are not printable by ordinary means, regular printer, because the lines are so closely spaced that your normal printers cannot come up with this, a matching one that this device lets you detect. So there are many such things that essentially now combine image processing and all the AI-ish kind of technologies with the blockchain. In general, what I would say is, just like big data and AI go together in many ways with machine learning, this, that, as long as the blockchain is being used to capture a lot of data, which is, just product data or even keeping track of the provenance of goods, then that can be used in order to detect various things, the optimized route planning, or to even detect any kind of fraudulent activities where certain goods, like, I don't know, how North Korea obtains certain goods and so on, based on transfer of ownership across some fishy channels and things like that. So fraudulent activities of any kind, by combining the information in the blockchain, which, as Sindhu was saying, can be much more reliable and such than random data out there in the web, you can hope to do many more things.
Great, thanks for that response. And if you've been to any of these blockchain talks or even artificial intelligence talks, typically what you hear is that this is going to be revolutionary, it's going to change the world. So I just wonder, in execution, how do we expect to see the effects of blockchain and artificial intelligence coming together in our day-to-day lives over the next 5 to 20, 50 years maybe? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just read an article recently that compared where we are with AI and blockchain to the creation of electricity. And it said we're at that same point. If we go back 100 years, that's where we are today. And think about all the changes that took place in our life very, very quickly. It's gone from physical power to electricity. And all the industries that were converted very, very quickly. Agriculture, transportation, manufacturing. And that's the place we are today. So that's our starting point. So, when we go to these conferences, we're coming out with a lot of ideas, but the ideas, it'll take another 10, 20 years before those things come to fruition. But imagine, we are 100 years ago, and Nikola Tesla's here with AC.
I actually talk about it in a more relatable fashion. Even yesterday, when I was giving a talk at the hackathon, I was saying, we are in the blockchain arena, especially with private blockchains, where relational database technology was 40 years ago. Systems had been introduced, but how to use them and so on, cookbook style things, are not yet there. We have all sorts of features, and as I said, there aren't even any standards, so which makes it one level harder than when relational systems came out. And so there are many, many tools that can be developed, and a lot of them, as it has happened with many other things like indexing advisor, this, that, in the database area, would involve combining some elements of what you might or might not necessarily call as AI. Some people might think of them as operations research rather than AI, but this word is now being used phrase is being used so loosely. A lot of things have been subsumed by the AI community of the second generation.
Well, look at it. If you look at it for a while, we have Lisp and Ops 5 35 years ago, right? But it's only been to today when we have the horsepower, the hardware horsepower, to be able to do something extraordinary. But I remember 35 years ago, Lisp and Ops 5.
Yeah.
Okay. And Michael, please go ahead and give your perspective.
Yeah, to me, if you think about 20 years from now, I think AI and blockchain can lead to sort of a fully automated world. What do I mean by that? Like today, if you're buying a house, for example, you have to sign, I don't know, 20 different sort of legal papers. Some company needs to transfer your title, and that's a huge pain in the ass. So imagine where basically with just a click of a button, or even you just saying, oh, I want to buy this house, it automatically happens for you. Or sort of a lot of the day-to-day activities that are done today by humans, like trash removal, or the types of products that you're buying in different types of stores, if they just happen to come by at the right time when you want it, right at that moment of consumption, I think that's what AI and blockchain really enables. Because if you don't even need to think about what to consume next and the optimal thing is just sort of presented to you when you need it, I think that's really the inherent power behind sort of this full automation that we can experience in the next 20 years.
I mean, there's a company called Propy that I was on the board of that's actually in real estate doing, if you get a chance, check it out on the blockchain side. So we're actually doing transactions. They did, so you can see them. It's a company that did an ICO probably a year ago.
Perfect. So if with any new technology, blockchain, artificial intelligence is no different. Typically you hear the promise of a great future, but people very rarely speak to in execution some of the negative consequences that this new technology introduces. So it just so happens that we have one of the foremost experts on this panel. So what are your thoughts on blockchain, artificial intelligence, and potentially any adverse effects that we're not thinking about at the moment?
Thank you. AI and blockchain. Two buzzwords coming together. What could go wrong? Right now, if you look at any technology in general, every technology has the power to do good and has the power to do bad. But technology by itself is just a tool. And it's us, individuals, on how we use it that make it do good or essentially do harm to humans. At this rate of exponential growth and usage of AI and any other technology, you will find that in the past, innovation has been driven mostly by regulation. So if you wanted to go to the moon, the government would put up a bill, and it goes into Congress. They vote on it and approve a budget, and then you go to the moon. But today, innovation is mostly driven by corporations, especially the ones who have the biggest amounts of data. And now, as a corporation, there's a lot of stakeholders involved. And for the most part, you're looking on the upside. Where can you make the next buck? And if you look at the oil industry, someone will come into a village, they drill a well, and cause whatever harm they're going to create, and eventually will move away with all the resources, but then they'll come back and build a hospital as a charity to kind of help with all the mess they've already created. So with technology, it's kind of looking like that, where people are looking mostly on the upside of making money, kick everything out of my way, and once they get to the other side, they think that we can come back and correct what we've messed up. The problem with that mindset and thought process is that in the past, all the technologies we've used or created, you could look at the rocks, you could look at fire, we could look at even nuclear weapons. Individuals had to consciously press a button to abuse that technology rather. But today, the way we're building AI and any other technology, we're kind of giving away, by the day, we're giving away the power of us individuals being able to make decisions. So, AI being able to be smarter than humans, it may be a little far away, but it is controlling us right now. You can look at number of hours we are spending on devices, or parents outsourcing their parenting to devices. You just hand your kids some phones and you watch them spend hours and hours on the phone. So that's on the AI side. But if you look on the blockchain has its own, it's one positive. We say, okay, blockchain can come in and decentralize these things and help us fix some of the problems that we have. But even blockchain itself has some issues. So if you look at if a node is created, right, and so there's no right to be forgotten. For instance, if some lie is repeated many times, eventually it becomes a truth. So if in driving, for instance, if you had a point on your driver's license, you can go to the DMV, you can fight it, and maybe they can take it off. In blockchain, once you create things, we've created them forever. So trash in, trash forever. You can't block blockchain. Once you've created it, it's there. So
yeah, very interesting. That is area that people don't talk about. They talk about the immutability and the lack of the ability for somebody else to come exchange that data. But then you have to think of who was the first person to put that data on the block. Was that a legitimate piece of data to be stored? So maybe a follow-up question to what you said. Thinking about corporations, typically we see behavior based off of what they're incentivized on. So how do we incentivize corporations to be more ethical in this space? Which is not to say they're not doing it now, but just to ensure that they're thinking about humanity as a whole and not thinking about individual corporate profits.
I mean, as humans, we make blood cells. The purpose of life is not to just make blood cells. And if you look at business, it needs profit to survive, right? But the purpose of business is not just to make profit. So as innovators and creators, if we are continuing to build the systems, we need to really be thinking deeply about what is that other thing that we're creating for. So if we just focus on the profit and that's the only driver, eventually with AI combined with blockchain, we will drive humanity toward a cliff.
Okay. And please, Mohan, go ahead and respond to that.
Yeah, specifically to address your question, I want to re-emphasize my concerns with ICOs and such things. Inventions of new ways of doing things to circumvent regulation, which we knew what it cost in 2007, 2008, mortgage-backed securities and so on, it's very reminiscent of that phenomenon now with ICOs. For that reason, I believe strongly that it's not enough to let the market, police itself. You do need government regulations and so on, because greed takes over anybody and everybody, organizations included, and we have seen enough evidence of that just in the Bay Area. I won't name the banks and so on that indulged in all sorts of hanky-panky. So for many such reasons, I believe regulations are important. The other point I also want to mention is that there were two individuals who got the Turing Award in 1994 for AI. I had the pleasure of recently listening to them. This is Raj Reddy of Carnegie Mellon University and Ed Feigenbaum of Stanford. There haven't too many prizes that have been given Turing Awards for the AI space, and these guys have talked about the difference between AI 1.0 and AI 2.0. If you are interested, I can offline point you to the material. And Raj Reddy in particular said certain things that he never thought would happen in his lifetime have already happened in the AI space. And then he was trying to rationalize how that came about. And a lot of that has to do with big data. While in the blockchain space, the amount of data is minuscule really compared to what traditional databases have. In due course of time, especially if private blockchains get used for more business-oriented kinds of transactions rather than all this game playing with cryptocurrency, then I believe a lot of the applications of machine learning, that's been done with big data will begin to apply to data that's also under the domain of blockchain systems.
Can I add something on the regulations? So with AI and blockchain or any technology in general right now, it's not a matter of if or when or why, it's how does it get regulated? Because it's the people who have the most amount of data that are controlling it. And they hide behind the privacy laws of saying, oh, my client, you don't need to look behind the curtains. And they keep fighting the regulators from looking in the back. So it's not the if, it's just what kind of regulations. We're still stuck in the old ways of centralized systems, and that's kind of the framework we're trying to use to create regulations for decentralized systems, which doesn't work. So we need to figure out a whole other set of thinking where we're creating these regulations.
We'll have to have the president call on you for that. So, so I'm relatively new to this space, but as we have thought leaders here, I'd like to have you all kind of talk through your thoughts and everybody speak on this, but what conversations are we having now that we probably should dig a little bit deeper in, as it'll have a tremendous effect over the next X amount of years? Or what conversations are we not having right now? Things that aren't really top of mind that we're not considering that's going to affect us as a whole. So, Sindhu, please start.
Yeah, one of the things to carry on from our initial the conversation on regulation. Yeah, so I think one of the things that we didn't talk in this forum is about the loss of jobs or due to automation. That is something that we should governments should be considering, and I think they are already looking at in very specific experiments that they are doing on what happens if there is no job or there is a minimum wage given to every citizen. So these kinds of experiments are happening in mainly in Europe and some happening in the US as well. So I think government should take a look at very seriously this questions and be ready with the answers, because the problem is different from the past revolutions like industrial revolution. This revolution is happening at a speed that we who is doing this revolution itself cannot comprehend. And if we wait any longer, I think the results could be something that we don't want to have. So I think all of us as a community needs to look at this.
That's a really great thought. I'd like to add to that in a sense that we actually, with this technology, have a chance to redefine what it means to be a human being living in society. Do we want to keep working, 40, 50 hours a week and sort of call that our life, or do we actually want to spend more time, enjoying all that life has to offer? Because there's this huge promise that, full automation could deliver a life that you don't necessarily need to sort of be, this sort of 40-hour work week part of. And to me, that's really interesting because, there are certain approaches to sort of that problem around basic income, for example, or taxing machines that are producing something for society so that that can then fuel some of that basic income perspective. So I think talking a little bit about, what does it mean to be a human in modern society, I think is a conversation we should also have, because it can really redefine what our life could be. Because not everybody needs to be, gainfully employed. I feel like that's an industrial revolution type of concept. Like you run a machine for a specific time, you need some break in between so it can recover, and you keep running the same machine. I feel that's an outdated perspective of what human life could be.
Yeah. Anybody else want to speak to it, maybe quickly?
So I honestly believe that we need a new concept. And I want to introduce this thing called, we need to move away from the juicing economy to more of like a soup economy.
Trying to make us hungry?
Follow me, come with me. The juicing economy is mostly you get the orange and just squeeze the heck out of it until it just doesn't have any to give. The soup economy is more like you have all these ingredients coming in at the right time, at right angle, to create this amazing, combination of things that's tasty and great, okay? So right now, for the most part, every single person in this room has a version of their story as to why and how their idea is unique, is the best in the world, and they're gonna crush the competition. Okay? And right there, it's war. You're fighting, right? But if we can get to a point where we know profit is important and think beyond profit, right? And start to look at how do we create a regenerative style of innovation. And by the way, I want to mention one thing. I love technology. I use technology. I'm not saying anything against technology, because innovation has been polarized. You're either for it or you're against it. There's no middle ground. So we need to be able to figure out how we come into the middle and think seriously about why we're creating technology, and think about the humanity and the planet, because if we destroy it, we won't have any technology to use in the first place.
Well said. So Mohan, maybe if you want to give a quick response?
I thought maybe we should invite some questions from the audience rather than us just talking.
Okay. So with that said, is there any questions for the audience for this panel? Anything that you'd like to discuss? So.
Hi, I'm Radhika Iyengar-Emmons. Good discussion on some of the points on AI and blockchain. What I am curious is, what do you see as challenges that are currently we're experiencing in AI and ML, for example, that are solvable by blockchain?
Who wants to take that?
Well, I mean, Sindhu already referred to one of them. I assume you heard her talk about how traditionally the problem has been with dirty data, and the hope is that with the blockchain, maybe the data can be more trustworthy and things like that. So there could be less conflicts in the data, all that, technology that's being developed to deal with inconsistent data in heterogeneous data integration kind of problems might be less of a problem, because now you have multiple eyes looking at what's happening and validating before it actually enters the blockchain. It's not like stuff can just get in because one person wants to put it there. We have the notion, the fabric, for example, of the concept of endorsements having to be performed by multiple nodes, and so that's where you can make sure before you accept something as quote-unquote fact that you do enough of the consistency checks and such.
I guess the only follow-on would be, I see a big problem with bias, for example. So I mean, yes, data is one of the aspects in terms of what you do with that data and how do you manipulate that data, but I see a lot of bias in AI, for example.
Yeah, in fact, at this year's VLDB conference, there'll be a panel. There are a bunch of people now in the database area that are looking at the bias that can be caused by all sorts of algorithms, recommendation systems, this, that. Because in some sense, it's like what you base your training on. If you base your training on the majority population, then the minority suffers, whether it's ethnic minority or national origin, whatever. So there's a great deal of focus, at least in the research community now, about the ethics of what constitutes valid kinds of patterns and this and that. And so that is an area that definitely needs to be looked into much more.
Yeah. Just a quick answer to your question as well around what area it could enable. Usually machine learning needs huge amounts of training data as well, and so blockchain or sort of cryptocurrencies could create a incentivized model where sort of human-guided pattern recognition and so on could be made a lot cheaper, so that the sort of startup problem of using machine learning in your application gets a lot lower as well. So similar aspect.
Yeah, so if you look at the most recent data breaches that you've probably seen in the most recent days, the idea that the big companies that have the most amount of money are the ones controlling what kind of AI we get to see. You can look, so I'll give an example. In the classroom, if we bring AI in the classroom, the person with the most amount of money will essentially turn teachers into brand ambassadors. Think about that. So I think blockchain can help us by decentralizing things, we don't give too much power to one entity, if that makes sense.
Okay, so the other thing is with blockchain on AI, you can limit the tasks of AI with a smart contract. And so we talk about the effects of AI running wild. That may be one of the ways to limit it. Okay, Jamal?
Okay, thanks. And I know we're pushing for time. Do we have time for one more question, or?
Okay, let's it be 3 more short questions. That's
Okay.
30 seconds, okay?
3 more short questions and short answers.
Okay, I'll try to squeeze this question really short, but we were talking about jobs, right? So you mentioned revolution which happened before, industrial revolution, right? But the thing is, when industrial revolution happened, there were a lot of manual labor, and then they were able to requalify and get more education. So we got engineers, we got people who work fixing machinery or creating machinery, right? With the artificial intelligence, yes, we can create people, for example, who will work on scripting or coding. But at some point, we will have artificial intelligence that will create another artificial intelligence, or will serve to fix another artificial intelligence. So we will not even need the programmers for artificial intelligence at some point. So what will we do at this point? What will the human being, and what would be the mean of exchange? Because now we give our time for work and get money. But if we don't have this system, then what is the mean of exchange?
Okay.
And what's the value of it?
Quick answer.
It's a great question, maybe something that we cannot answer right now. But one of the thoughts that I want to talk about here is a new industry or skill set that we have been quietly, seeing build up here, which is teaching the machines. So we are used to, teaching babies, teaching children to have skills, but there is something that is, there is a huge amount of work in teaching these machines, because machines as such with algorithms cannot have any skills. They need to be taught. And there is a knowledge industry evolving where humans sit and teach machines. And I know that because it's happening in our own company, and I'm sure that's happening in every company that is using AI. So in one way, we are shifting the work as teaching machines. So that could be one of the aspects where we can focus on.
Okay, thanks. And if we still have time for another question, just
one more, please.
Not too philosophical, not too loaded, please.
Why would you say that once you see me come up here? I just had a comment about the different things we're discussing around machine learning and automating of jobs. I don't think that there's any way to stop it. And it's already, we're seeing the impacts on our community. So I just want to remind people of a few things. Unemployment rates are directly connected to rates of domestic violence, child protective services reports, community trauma, and community violence. So we need to keep that in mind as we're developing this technology, right? Because there's going to be a few people, who will be able to get those jobs to program the robots. But for a large amount of society, it's going to be a really destitute situation. So I just want to remind us of that. And if we can create more blockchain, right, that creates the need for both the technological and the analog solutions where you have people on the ground, that's what's really going to help our society balance. And we're talking about, oh, we have this technology, that technology. Where's the resources going to come from? Because you're in Africa right now pulling all this raw material from inside the ground to build all these different things, and we're running out of these natural resources, right? So I say, let's not burn the candle at two ends. We got to be really careful here. Let's think with the conservationist type of lens, and let's really think with the lens of intergenerational trauma in our business efforts. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well said. Chris, please respond.
Yeah, thank you. That is an amazing point you made. Automation is here and is here to stay. The genie has left the bottle already. We cannot stop it. If you can't fight it, you gotta join it. You just gotta figure out how you ease that transition from the current system, the way they are, and going to that new era of life. So if you think about United States, there is 29 states, I repeat, 29 states where driving is the #1 job in those states. Think about that. All the vehicles are getting automated, and as jobs are getting, the AI is taking the bigger and bigger and bigger bite out of the workforce. We just got to figure out how we ease into the transition as opposed to try to fight it and stop it, because we can't. It's already left.
Very good point. So we want to thank everybody for coming out and hearing this conversation today. I definitely want to thank the panelists for coming up here and speaking and giving your opinions. If you want to learn more about any of the panelists, if you go to the Blockchain Economic Forum website, they have their contact information there and how to reach out to them and learn more. And then we also want to thank BEF for hosting this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.